What if the fairy tale was never real? What if the Golden Beckham legacy didn't crack on its own, but was strategically pushed? Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a story that looks less like romance and more like a hostile takeover. Because somewhere between the luxury weddings, the Instagram love letters, and the billionaire dinner tables, Brooklyn Beckham didn't just get married. He disappeared. Vanished from his family. Vanished from his old life. And somehow re-emerged orbiting one of the most powerful dynasties money can buy. So let's ask the question nobody in celebrity media wants to touch. Did Brooklyn walk away, or was he quietly boxed out? Behind Nicola Peltz's polished smile sits a family that doesn't do chaos, they do control. And at the top, her billionaire father, a man insiders whisper has never seen Brooklyn as a partner, only a liability. A brand problem. A failure wrapped in a famous last name. Coincidence that Brooklyn's voice got louder right as his circle got smaller? That lawyers replaced phone calls? That loyalty suddenly required isolation? This isn't just about love gone wrong. It's about power, influence, and what happens when a legacy collides with a balance sheet. And trust me, this story gets darker from here. At first glance, it looked like a love story ripped straight from a luxury magazine spread. Brooklyn Beckham, son of football royalty, heir to one of the most polished family brands on earth, marries Nicola Peltz, actress, heiress, and daughter of a billionaire power broker. Cameras flashed. Designers competed. Headlines swooned. But behind the velvet ropes and diamond-lit smiles, something felt off. Because almost immediately after the wedding, Brooklyn didn't just change his last name status. He changed everything. His tone. His circle. His loyalty. His distance. And slowly, quietly, the Beckham family, once inseparable in public and private, began to fracture. This wasn't a normal family disagreement. This wasn't parents adjusting to a new spouse. This was a complete shutdown. Suddenly, Brooklyn wasn't calling home. He wasn't attending family events. He wasn't even speaking directly to his parents. According to multiple insider accounts, communication was reduced to intermediaries. Then lawyers. Then silence. And that's where the red flags started waving. Because people close to the Beckhams say this wasn't Brooklyn's usual behavior. This wasn't the kid who grew up surrounded by discipline, routine, and relentless structure. This was someone new. Someone colder. Someone speaking in legal language instead of emotional one. So what changed? Enter the Peltz family. Nicola Peltz didn't just marry into fame. She came from a world where fame means nothing without power. Her father, Nelson Peltz, isn't a celebrity. He's something far more dangerous, a corporate strategist. A billionaire investor known for takeovers, restructures, and cutting out anything he views as inefficient. And according to sources who've watched this situation closely, Nelson Peltz never bought into Brooklyn Beckham. Not the career, not the direction, not the identity. Photography, cooking, lifestyle branding, passion projects launched and abandoned. To the Beckham brand, that experimentation was protected. To the Peltz mindset, it looked like instability. Insiders claim that long before the wedding, doubts were already being whispered behind closed doors. Not publicly, not cruelly, just clinically. Brooklyn, they say, was seen as unfocused, a young man still searching for purpose while leaning on a legendary surname. And when power families smell weakness, they don't attack. They position. Here's where things get uncomfortable. Multiple anonymous sources allege that after the wedding, boundaries were drawn, not loudly, but firmly. Nicola remained deeply embedded in her family. Her support system stayed intact. Her access to wealth, influence, and protection never wavered. Brooklyn, on the other hand, began drifting away from his. Not halfway, not gradually, completely. Events were skipped. Invitations ignored. Birthdays passed without acknowledgement. And when the Beckhams reportedly tried to check in privately, not publicly, not for headlines, the response wasn't emotional. It was legal. A cease and desist. Think about that. A son sending a legal notice to his own parents, demanding they stop mentioning him publicly and route all communication through lawyers. That's not rebellion. That's separation. And here's the detail that keeps resurfacing in every insider conversation. Brooklyn didn't grow up this way. People who knew him as a teenager described someone anxious, guarded, shaped by fame but still tethered to family structure. Which is exactly why some observers believe this wasn't a spontaneous act of independence, but a guided one. Was Brooklyn standing up for himself? Or was he being convinced that cutting ties was the only way forward? Because from the outside, the optics are brutal.
Nicola kept her world. Brooklyn left his. She gained nothing. He lost everything familiar.
And in elite circles, that imbalance is never accidental. This wasn't just the beginning of a family feud. This was the opening move in a power realignment. And next, we get into what really happened behind the scenes and why the public story doesn't match the private damage. Once the silence settled, the leaks began.
Not official ones. Not on record.
The kind that always surface when powerful families collide and nobody wants fingerprints on the mess.
Anonymous insiders.
Friends of friends. People who suddenly felt the need to talk. Quietly. According to multiple so-called sources, what unfolded behind closed doors wasn't emotional healing.
It was strategy.
We're told meetings happened far from cameras. Lawyers, advisors, brand consultants. Conversations that didn't sound like family discussions but more like boardroom briefings. The kind where words like liability, optics, and risk management get thrown around casually.
And at the center of it all? Control.
Insiders claim Brooklyn's public statements didn't just sound rehearsed, they felt engineered.
Same phrasing. Same framing. Same themes repeated across platforms.
Standing my truth. Protecting my wife. Breaking free.
Powerful language. Viral language.
Language that plays well online. But critics noticed something else. The story only moved in one direction. Every accusation pointed outward. Every bridge burned led back to the Beckhams. And every solution required more distance, more silence, more isolation. Meanwhile, Nicola's side remained spotless. No public statements. No clarifications. No emotional messiness. Just carefully curated silence. Because when you come from real power, you don't argue. You wait. Then came whispers about money. Lavish spending patterns reportedly spiked after the wedding.
Private jets. Gated properties.
Elite circles where Brooklyn had never been seen before. A lifestyle upgrade that raised eyebrows even among celebrity watchers used to excess. And yet, here's the twist, Brooklyn wasn't bankrolling any of it. According to leaked documents referenced by online commentators, a strict prenuptial agreement was locked in early.
Brooklyn would never touch the Peltz fortune. Ever. No matter how long the marriage lasted.
On paper, that sounds fair.
Clean. Sensible.
In practice,
it meant something else entirely. Dependence without ownership.
Brooklyn's access to luxury came through proximity, not power. He lived inside the ecosystem, but didn't control it. And in elite power dynamics, that's a dangerous position to be in.
Public reaction exploded. Fans split into camps overnight.
Good for him. One side cheered. He finally escaped, said another.
But a growing number started asking uncomfortable questions.
Why did independence require isolation?
Why did every path forward involve cutting off the past?
And why did Brooklyn's world shrink while Nicola's stayed exactly the same? Then came the anonymous quotes. One alleged insider claimed, Brooklyn was never seen as an equal. He was seen as a project. Another added, the goal was stability, not his, the family's.
Social media did what it always does.
Memes.
Threads.
Deep dives. Amateur body language experts breaking down photos like crime scenes.
Every smile scrutinized. Every absence magnified.
And through it all, one man said nothing. Nicola Peltz.
No denials.
No defenses.
No reassurance. Just silence.
In his world, silence isn't weakness. It's confirmation. And as public pressure grew, so did the stakes, because whispers were turning into demands, and demands into consequences. And that's where things started getting truly dangerous. By the time the dust started settling, one thing was clear, this was no longer just a family dispute.
It had become a public reckoning. Online pressure mounted fast. Hashtags trended. Commentary channels exploded.
Every old interview, every wedding clip, every awkward pause was reanalyzed like evidence in an open case. And suddenly, what began as a private decision looked like something much bigger, something structural. Speculation took over. Would lawyers get involved beyond cease and desist letters? Would brand partners start asking questions? Would this quiet Cold War trigger formal damage control behind the scenes? Industry insiders whispered about hypothetical scenarios no one wanted to confirm.
Emergency PR consultations.
Reputation audits. Even the possibility of financial reviews, not because of wrongdoing, but because high-profile family implosions tend to attract scrutiny whether anyone asks for it or not. And that's the real danger of power struggles at this level. Perception becomes reality. For Brooklyn, the consequences appeared immediate and deeply personal. Opportunities slowed. Collaborations went quiet. The experimental career pivots that once felt protected suddenly felt exposed. Without the Beckham machine actively backing him, every move carried more risk and less forgiveness. Critics began framing him not as rebellious, but as unreliable. And in elite circles, reliability is currency. Meanwhile, the Beckham family did something unexpected. They stayed calm. No public counterattacks. No emotional interviews. No messy clapbacks. Just carefully worded appearances, continued support of their other children, and a visible refusal to escalate. To some observers, that restraint looked like patience. To others, it looked like waiting. Because here's the unspoken truth. Families like the Beckhams don't collapse easily. They endure. They outlast storms. And they don't usually slam doors. They leave them open. The question is whether Brooklyn can still walk back through. Because while he insists he has no regrets, insiders claim the cost has been heavier than expected. No casual check-ins. No unfiltered advice. No safety net to fall back on if things go wrong. Every interaction now feels formal. Managed. Conditional. And once relationships reach that stage, repair isn't emotional, it's logistical. Then there's the Peltz side of the equation. Nelson Peltz remains silent. Strategic. Untouchable. A man who understands that saying nothing often says everything. In his world, emotion is noise. Structure is law. And instability is weakness. Observers note something chilling. If Brooklyn ever wanted to reconcile publicly, would that be supported or discouraged? Would independence suddenly be reframed as disloyalty? No one knows. And that uncertainty is the real fallout. Because this isn't about villains or heroes. It's about leverage. Two powerful families. Two value systems. One young man caught between legacy and control. Love and isolation. Freedom and dependence. And the longer this stalemate continues, the harder it becomes to undo. Pride hardens. Narratives lock in. Lines get crossed that can't be erased with apologies. So what happens next? Does Brooklyn double down, proving this separation was worth the cost? Or does time do what power can't, soften positions and reopen doors? For now, the story remains unfinished. But one thing is undeniable. Brooklyn Beckham didn't just change families. He changed the rules of his life. And whether that was courage or a calculated trap, that depends on who's really holding the power. After everything you've heard, the silence, the power plays, the legal language replacing family conversations, what do you actually believe? Was this a brave stand by Brooklyn Beckham? A man finally breaking free from a life designed for him before he could choose for himself? Or was this something far colder, far more calculated? A quiet reshuffling of influence, where isolation looked like independence and control wore the mask of protection. Ask yourself this: why does freedom come with fewer voices around you? Why does every path forward require cutting ties backward? And why does one side lose everything familiar while the other loses nothing at all? Some people will say this is just love. Others will say it's manipulation. And a few will admit the uncomfortable truth: that when billionaire power collides with celebrity legacy, someone always gets reshaped. The Beckhams say the door is still open. Brooklyn says he has no regrets. Nicola stays silent. And Nelson Peltz? He watches. So who's really in control here? Because history has shown us one thing. When stories like this go quiet, they are not over, they are just waiting. Now we want to hear from you. Drop your honest take in the comments. No filters. No PR spin. Is Brooklyn a victim, a rebel, or a willing participant? Is this love or leverage? And if you want more deep dives that question the narratives you're fed, if you want stories that don't flinch, don't flatter, and don't play safe,